Governor Bush, both you and the Vice President have offered plans to provide prescription drugs for the elderly. What makes your plan superior?
Jim, I'd like to interrupt here and answer that question as if it were my turn to speak.
Saturday Night Live has made a habit of skewering political candidates on the air, but this year the tradition of poking fun at the politicians may be moving to a new level. Al Gore and George W. Bush are also popping up in commercials, but not the way you might expect. Take a look at this ad for Snickers.
Psst, vote for me. My dad was president. I even look like my dad.
Big deal. My dad was a senator. Yep.
We have the same shoe size.
Yeah, well, I invented the internet. Lots of other stuff, too.
Once my mom thought I was my dad.
Space shuttle. That was mine.
On the phone, people think I'm my dad.
Guess me. I'm on TV.
We have the same name. My dad and I, that is.
Not going anywhere for a while? Grab a Snickers. Peanuts, caramel, and chocolate. That ought to hold you.
My dad and I wear the same pants.
I invented pants.
Hungry? Grab a Snickers.
Funny stuff, but are these commercials taking a risk by assuming the candidates are fair game, or is no one off limits, even the next president of the United States? Joining us to talk about that is advertising executive and author of the book, Just Say Yes, Philip Nolman. Nice to have you back here, Philip.
Nice to be here.
Is there a risk there in poking fun at the candidates to sell your product?
Well, I think there is. I think that the risk is minimal when you're doing a talk show. But when you cross the line into commercial sales, advertising, there is a risk of offending the American consumer in some regard, and particularly with what's going on today and the critical nature of this election. The world has changed in the last 4 weeks, so this particular campaign runs a high risk.
Yeah, because the world has become a lot more serious in terms of the issues as we watch what plays out in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And there was what almost seemed like what has been used as a cheap shot, that whole internet thing being brought up.
Right, so there is a bias to this campaign, and that connecting that to a product could turn off a great many voters.
And this, we should mention, this isn't the only product that is doing, is mixing politics and commercialism. Is this a trend, though, that we're going to be seeing? Are these guys particularly fair game? Are they funny?
Yeah, I think that these guys are particularly fair game because the American public was totally underwhelmed by the first 2 debates. We anticipate being underwhelmed again. Uninteresting, uninspired dialogue. So they become fair game by virtue of that.
Now, certainly not to sit here and sell Snickers, but as a Snickers ad and given their campaign not going anywhere, does it work?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, I really don't. I think that it's clever and it's cute, but I think as far as positioning the product well, it absolutely fails.
All right. Phil Newman, we appreciate you being here and sharing your expertise.
My pleasure.
It's good to have you here on Newsfront today. With all the big news going on around the world today. And we're glad you're with us. We have been showing you how easy it can be for young kids to sneak into R-rated movies, get their hands on violent video games, and purchase adult-oriented tapes, all stuff that we were told was restricted. As a parent, is that something that worries you or should worry you? We've assembled a panel of 6 moms and dads who have preteen children to talk about that. I'm going to start with Diane. You have a couple of boys under 13?
Yes, 10 and 12.
You saw Diane's report of the kids able to buy that stuff with little problem. Is that something that surprises you?
No, I think my boys could probably have done the same thing.
You think they would?
No, I don't think they would. Give them a couple years and they might try.
Well, let me ask over here, Alex, you've also got boys. Do you think it is the government's responsibility or ultimately your responsibility to keep your kids away from that material?
I think it's ultimately it's mine, my wife's responsibility. I think the government probably should have a hand in it, but ultimately it's our responsibility.
This is this is an election year, folks, and some have suggested that we're hearing a lot about this and we won't hear any after November. Maureen, you've got an 11-year-old boy?
11-year-old son.
Where do you think all this stands in terms of your responsibility vis-a-vis the government's action on this?
Just as a parent, I appreciate having some kind of guidelines. And if they just leave it as a guideline and then leave it up to the parent, I think that would be the best.
Well, and that brings us to the point. Before we went into the break, I asked for a show of hands of who had children who had seen our movies. Did anybody actually take their child to an R movie?
Yeah.
You took your child. You took your child to an R movie, and what were your thoughts doing that? I mean, that was going to affect him in some way? Or?
I did it, and it was to The Patriot. And there was something that happened in real life history. That to me is different than a James Bond or other movies, which I'm sure at some point he'll also ask to see that.
Yeah. The fact, though, that kids can get into an R-rated movie and can get music videos with very violent lyrics, how much would that concern It's Betsy, right?
Yeah.
Betsy, how much would that concern you that your child could get in and get access to this stuff?
It doesn't concern me a lot because I do feel that we as parents have to control our kids. The thing that bothers me is that there are not enough alternatives to those R-rated movies. Try to find one that's interesting to sophisticated 10 to 12-year-olds that's not R-rated, and you can't find it. Same with video games. They don't exist. I think they need a little more creativity.
That's a good point. I tried the same thing last weekend. Scoured the papers. Weren't many family movies out there, were there? Anybody else discovered that same problem, that it's a lack of alternatives?
Definitely. And it's not just with the movies. I mean, you talked about the video games and the music. I really think that my children would like to play strategic, interesting games or listen to some music that isn't, you know, that their 5-year-old sister would like. But I can't find it for them. Yeah.
What I want to ask you about now is the FTC basically this week said, not only is this stuff out there, but it's being marketed toward kids. Philip, you've got a 10-year-old. Does he ever come up and say, hey, I want to see this movie or get that game, stuff that you know is adult material?
Absolutely.
Do you think it's a product of him seeing the advertisements?
I do, and I think that actually the most violent communication kids receive is through professional wrestling on television, which they emulate. And we're seeing that as news stories all the time. They're doing it in their backyards. So the connection between the violence they see and what they do is what troubles me.
Carrie, how many times have you looked up from your paper and seen a commercial on during your child's show that has raised your eyebrows?
Probably too often. No, I wonder often where it's all going to end. It seems like every couple of years the bar raises higher and higher on the level of violence, on sexual content in things that our kids have easy access to. You know, I want to know where it's all going to end.
Some interesting comments. We're going to be back with some final thoughts from our panel in just a moment. We appreciate you being here. We'll be right back on Newsfront. Spent a lot of the last hour talking about kids and violence and marketing of media themes, and we want to finish up with our panel here. I want to ask all of you ever heard of Eminem?
Yes.
Yeah. Anybody heard of Lil Kim?
Yeah.
Yep.
Your kids listen to it? Anybody's kids listen to this stuff?
No.
Not yet.
Is it worried? Do you know what's on them? These are very just a couple of artists who have very graphic messages, and I made the point to Diane earlier. You know, we tend to know what the movies are, the R-rated movies, but a lot of us don't know what's on these, and a lot of our kids may be interested. I want to thank all of you for being with us here and spending some time with us Newsfront and help us explore this very important topic about our kids. Thanks so much. Here's a look at what's coming up your way.